Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuelans commemorated 20 years of the first electoral victory of Hugo Chavez, the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution. A march was organized by the Socialist Party from Plaza Morelos. Chavez won the presidency with 56% of the vote, a landslide victory. Once he took office, he began the social justice policy programs to help the poorest in Venezuela. He also rewrote the constitution, which is considered to be one of the most progressive and egalitarian. In Austria, representatives from the 15 member states of the OPEC met on Thursday, where Venezuela is to assume presidency of the Conference of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries from January next year. The Minister of Popular Power of Petroleum, Manuel Quevedo, confirmed that the Venezuelan delegation is ready to fulfill their responsibility in their new role. He also said that Venezuela will effectively uphold the interest in developing and economic growth nation members. The United States has been putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to keep prices low. Ahead of the meeting, there was a consensus that production should be cut to prevent a further fall in prices, but not of how much.
Did you recommend a cut?
Yes, but we haven't discussed
Is there a number?
Not yet. Work in progress.
But you recommended a cut.
Huh?
Did you recommend a cut?
We all did.
Oh, you?
And Venezuela and Russia have signed a number of agreements across various sectors, including oil trade deals. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed to raise oil production between the state PDVSA and Rosneft companies. They will also cooperate on gold mining production and the importation of wheat. The countries will also strengthen their military cooperation agreements. The Russian Defense Minister, Sergei Shoigu, is satisfied with the military cooperation. He's confident that Russia can continue using Venezuela ports and airdromes. His Venezuelan counterpart, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, also took the opportunity to state that Venezuela wants to modernize the weapon system that it was supplied by the Russian Federation in 2006.
We do a good job in the education sector. We provide opportunities for our planes to make landings. Our fleet also serves in Venezuela ports. I think we're going to get on with it.
Our relations started when Hugo Chavez was president, and now with Nicolás Maduro, commander-in-chief of the National Bolivarian Armed Forces.
Now we go to Russia to our correspondent Hansel Oro, who has more details of Maduro's visit.
During their meeting, President Nicolás Maduro and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin signed key agreements to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Maduro says these deals are mainly focused on energy, mining, agriculture, communication, and also include technical military expertise sharing. Meanwhile, in the area of agriculture, Russia will supply over 500,000 tons of wheat to Venezuela in the coming year. The leaders also discussed possible future investigation in gold and diamond mining. Maduro says, and quoting, "We will continue our agenda for a multilateral vision of Venezuela after signing important agreements on defense, finances, oil and trade matters and more." Maduro also emphasized the need for a balanced financial system. This, while his counterpart Putin has condemned attempts by the U.S. government, the European Union and regional allies to change Venezuela's political situation through purposed military interventions. Putin described this as nothing but forced terrorist acts against Venezuela. The Russian president has expressed support for political dialogue that respects differences and, above all, respect for the people's authority.
And just ahead of the OPEC meeting in Vienna, the leaders of the two major oil-producing countries met in Moscow. We are talking about Venezuela's president, Nicolás Maduro, and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Our correspondent, Hansel Oro, has this story.
The aim was to strengthen an already close relationship. The presidents of Russia and Venezuela met at the government residence in Novo Ogaryovo, just outside Moscow.
We have settled on the best way forward. We are putting into action a wide-ranging economic program which fits perfectly into our shared vision of cooperation between Russia and Venezuela.
President Putin condemned the pressure exerted by some foreign governments to promote violence against the Bolivarian revolution, including the failed assassination attempt against President Maduro and his ministers on August the 4th in Caracas.
We support your efforts to reach a mutual understanding in Venezuela and to establish relations with the opposition. We condemn any acts of a clearly terrorist nature and any attempt to change the situation by force.
I am very happy to be here, and I know things will only get better in the future. We are standing up and resisting. We have suffered all kinds of aggression and threats, and this has been a learning process.
The strategic relation between these two countries includes areas like energy and mineral exploration, as well as technical, military, educational, and cultural collaboration. According to the Kremlin, trade and other economic exchanges between the two countries totaled $68.4 million in 2017. And in the first 9 months of this year, that increased to more than $79 million, a sign that the ties between Russia and Venezuela are growing stronger.
And now we move to Colombia, where students are holding more protests over the lack of funding for public universities. Students, along with trade unions and other social movements, have been protesting for weeks against the government of President Iván Duque. Many of the demonstrations have met with fierce repression from the police. The students say the government has the money to boost the education budget, but that it lacks the political will. Our correspondent, José Manuel Jiménez, in Bogotá, brings us the details.
We are here at the National Square in the center of Bogotá. This is one of the places where students have gathered and also met with different trade unions. Student-led strikes have been going on for almost 2 months by now. They've been calling on Iván Duque's government to solve issues around education financing for this year and raise the budget for the next year. They are essentially demanding the complete restructuring of policies on financing public higher education. There are 32 public higher education institutions in the country. They are also discussing higher education opportunities for students from lower-income families. Since the beginning of November, there are about 12 negotiations have been held between students and the government. However, despite these meetings, the government continues to state there are no funds available. The students have suggested various proposals to overcome the university's financial difficulties and also to improve their infrastructure. Students say these universities are literally falling apart, and the government negligence is not justified. These public universities, they say, could easily become the future of the country if the government will be willing to invest in them more. The student protesters have also condemned that the President Iván Duque has not even once sat down for talks with them directly over the last 2 months.
Now we move to Argentina, where hundreds of representatives of small and medium-sized business gather outside Congress to request urgent measures to mitigate the effects of the country's economic recession. Under the slogan, "Against the crisis, small and medium enterprises move towards Congress," 8 business entities with group companies from all over Argentina organized this gathering. They are denouncing the closure of 25 companies per day, on average under President Macri. Also in Argentina, small and medium-sized entrepreneurs gather outside Congress to demand measures to protect national industries. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more details.
Outside of Congress, small and medium business owners have gathered. There are more than 800,000 companies which generate work in the country. Since Mauricio Macri's government came into office, there has been a great crisis in the sector. More than 10,000 companies have closed and more than 107,000 workers were left without jobs. 10 shops are closing each day because of the loss of production and sales. Argentine business owners are demanding that the country's lawmakers create laws to assist these small businesses and create alternatives to get out of the crisis. Difficulties lie ahead, it seems, at least according to the policies which have already been announced by Macri's government.
First break here at From the South. We'll be back in a minute, but make sure to follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and my personal account, Laura P. Telesur. We'll be back. Welcome back. And now we update the situation in Mexico. Thousands of Central American migrants are still in the Mexican state of Tijuana, waiting for an answer to their asylum request to the United States government. And Pablo Perez has sent us this report from the U.S.-Mexico border.
So 19 days after the migrant caravan arrived here at Tijuana in the border within Mexico and the United States, the High Commissioner for the Human Rights of the United Nations Organization, Michelle Bachelet, stated that those migrants, especially refugee seekers, human rights must be respected all the time. It does not matter if they are accepted or not on the country of destiny, or if they are on transit, if they are walking, or if they are on a shelter. The care of those people, particularly children, and their human rights, it's the most important things that must be taken care of. Something that has been a concern for a lot of people since they started the journey 2 months ago in San Pedro Sula.
Unaccompanied minors from the migrant caravan has spoken of their hopes for a better life in the U.S. One of the cases is a teen from Honduras who was forced to flee after a gang killed his brother and threatened his life. He's hoping to find work in the U.S. Another one is a young teenage girl from El Salvador who escaped an abusive family and hopes to reunite with her relatives. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump justified his hardline policy against the caravan because he believed they are criminals. These youngsters are part of a group of more than 7,000 migrants that remain at the border, with hundreds more making their way up to Mexico.
My mother said that I called me. I explained the circumstance I was going through. I was assaulted. They beat me up. They robbed me, took my clothes, beat me up badly. Last time, they threatened me. Those who killed my brother kept threatening me too. So I said I want to come here because I was at risk there. They helped me out. They pray for me. Thanks to God, I am good and at the border.
Mum didn't know that I was abused by my grandmother. I told Mum that I wanted to come here. My sister also helped me. She said she would. My mum also helped me to come here. I told her that I was scared to be in El Salvador, and once in the United States, I would help her by sending money.
And the newly inaugurated Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador confirmed that he will be speaking to President Trump about the migrant crisis.
President Trump sent us congratulations on Monday, and we are maintaining a permanent communication. And it is good. Relations are good. We will likely get in touch with President Trump for this special matter, the one that has to do with the migratory phenomenon.
Police in Peru have arrested the country's Football Federation chief Edwin Oviedo on suspicion of involvement in a corruption ring that involves judges and businessmen. He was arrested during an early raid on his house in Lima. This is the second time Oviedo's run-in with authorities in recent times. He is currently waiting judgment in a case in which he is accused of ordering the assassination of 2 trade unionists at a sugar company he controlled. And now we continue with Telesur's special series of reports from Brazil on the Cuban doctors who have been recalled by their government after Jair Bolsonaro criticized the More Doctor program. In this latest story, we dive into the heart of the Amazon for the last meeting of a doctor before they leave the area.
Dr. Arnaldo Cedeño Núñez wasn't able to say goodbye to his indigenous patients before leaving to his native Cuba. He learned about the suspension of Cuba's More Doctors program in Brazil after returning from his bi-weekly visit to the remote Bona village in the heart of the Amazon. But in the town he was based, his staff and patients bid him a tearful farewell.
Although people at Bona village lacked electricity and internet, I have never needed that. I just needed people to believe in me and my work, so that I can do what I enjoy the most, helping people. I want them to know that even though I will be far away, the Apalai people will always remain in my heart. I will never forget their village. It was a special place. Thank you for everything. I send you hugs and I wish you the best, but most importantly, I hope that God sends a doctor to that place soon. Someone who can help you the way I wanted to continue to do so.
Cedeño is leaving for Cuba soon, so he had to take a break from farewells and pay one last visit to patients who will remain without a doctor after he's gone.
Many things happen here, and as you can see, the distances between settlements are big, so attending patients is very difficult. Now that the program ended, we lost a doctor who looked after all of us. The indigenous community was astonished at his departure.
Merely 20 days after assisting in a childbirth with no complications, Cedeño was called to the newborn baby who was in serious condition. But after the Cuban doctor left, the baby was left without any medical checkups for more than 2 weeks.
If the case is not followed, it could lead to a severe malnutrition. An accompaniment that preferably should be done with a doctor, and in this case they will not have that opportunity.
Nearly 90% of the indigenous population depended exclusively on the assistance of Cuban doctors. Bolsonaro's aggressions that ended the assistance program coincides with his intention to extinguish the indigenous demarcation of lands, 2 sides of the same coin, in a genocide that began centuries ago.
To Mr. Bolsonaro, I say to him that he always speaks in the name of God, who was the creator of the universe. But on the other hand, he has projects against the indigenous populations that are also sons of God. We cannot accept that.
Those left behind get news of the Cuban doctor who could not say goodbye to his indigenous patients. The Apalai Huayna embraced the doctor who set foot on his territory, and of course they said goodbye with the fermented mandioca brava drink, known as cachiri. This drink is used to recreate the rituals that the ancestral heroes of this ethnic group performed.
In Chile, educators and assistants of kindergartens of the Integra Foundation continue protests throughout the national territory. More than 1,200 kindergartens demand a salary adjustment and better working conditions. Teachers also sent a letter to demand the fulfillment of their request. But if there is no answer, they will continue to mobilize through a definite stoppage. They have been paralyzed for 4 days. Now to the Caribbean, where at least 4 people have been killed in the Dominican Republic in a plastic factory explosion. Fire crews and the army rushed to the scene in Santo Domingo to search for anyone trapped in this debris. The head of the fire brigade said the blast was caused by a gas leak inside the plant. President Danilo Medina promised support for the families of the victims. Classes were suspended at schools in the vicinity. Time for a second break here in Telesur. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now more news. Protests continue in France against President Emmanuel Macron's economic reforms and the deteriorating condition of living. Police in Nantes used tear gas grenades to disperse students who had blocked the entrance to their school and set a car on fire. The Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, announced on Wednesday that he was calling off the fuel tax increases planned for 2019, in what many say as a desperate bid to end the protest which has rocked the country. A car bomb blast outside a police station in Iran has left at least 4 people dead and dozens injured. According to local sources, a suicide bomber placed explosive inside a truck and blew himself up after being stopped at the police headquarters. No group has confirmed responsibility for the attack so far. In Burundi, the government has ordered the United Nations Human Rights Council to shut its office in the country within 2 months. Burundi has been at loggerheads with the UN since 2016, when the UN released a report warning of a risk of genocide, claiming systematic human rights abuses by the government. Burundi have been embroiled in a political crisis since President Pierre Nkurunziza announced his candidacy for a controversial third term in April 2015. Greeks have clashed with police in the 10th year anniversary of murdered teenager Alexis Grigoropoulos, the 15-year-old boy who was killed by policemen in the city of Athens. A demonstration took place to mark his death and denounce police repression. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is ready to act as a mediator to resolve the border situation between Ukraine and Russia in the Black Sea. During a meeting, Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov denounced the Ukrainian government for violating the Minsk agreements that tried to solve the conflict. Lavrov said he was also concerned about the passive attitude of some European countries to the xenophobic measures promoted by the government of Kiev towards the Russian people.
There is no alternative to the Minsk measures when it comes to resolving the Ukrainian conflict. The implementation of these measures, as well as the decisions taken by Normandy, have also been sabotaged by Kiev. Any efforts to resolve the Ukrainian crisis is continuously hampered. This includes state interference in the church, leading to further deterioration of the situation and dividing society. Now Kiev is exempt from any punishment and protected by its Western sponsors, which justify all its scandalous actions. And this is totally true when we talk about the recent provocations organized by the Ukrainian Navy in the Black Sea and in the contact line at Donbas.
A European Court of Justice will rule on whether the UK can cancel Brexit by revoking Article 50. The ruling will be heard on the 10th of December, the eve of the House of Commons will vote Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal. It was reported that an ECG Advocate General issued a legal opinion that the UK can unilaterally withdraw from the European Union. In Canada, Wang Su-men, the financial director of electronic giant Huawei, was detained at the request of the United States for allegedly violating sanctions on Iran. The Canadian Ministry of Justice reported in a statement that Wang Su-men was detained in Vancouver last Saturday, and the details of this case are confidential due to the judicial order. The State Department extended inquiries into Huawei's alleged violations of sanctions imposed on Iran. According to the spokesman for the Canadian Department of Justice, Huawei has been subject to rigorous control by the United States. About this, China has condemned the arrest of Huawei chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou by Canadian authorities on behalf of the United States. A statement by the country's foreign ministry has demanded an explanation from the U.S. and Canada. It added that the arrest was a violation of Meng's human rights and demanded her immediate release. The U.S. has been investigating Huawei for alleged violations of sanctions against Iran.
China has made clear its solemn position to Canada and United States, requesting to immediately clarify the grounds for detention, asking for immediate release. China provided consular assistance. China urges Canada to consider the security, humanitarian treatment, legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens.
Climate negotiators are continuing their discussions behind closed doors at the COP24 conference in Poland. But outside the main meetings, climate change activists have put on their own mock awards to bring attention to the lack of sincerity and hypocrisy of some of the participants. The mock Fossil Fuel of the Day award was unanimously given to Saudi Arabia. With this call for conscience about the climate change, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website, telesureenglish.net, where you can find more opinion articles and special interviews. Stay with us, connecting the Global South. Until next time.